Hey guys, tonight we're taking a long, dreamy stroll back in time, through desert winds, crumbling palaces, and the sound of sandals crunching over hot sand, to discover how the ancient Persians managed to invent ice cream in the literal middle of nowhere. Imagine this. Golden dunes stretch in every direction, the sun is so bright it might as well be a second god. And yet, someone, somewhere, is spooning cool rosewater-scented sorbet into a ceramic bowl. You, of course, are there, right in the middle of it. You're standing just outside the gates of Persepolis, sometime around the 5th century BCE. The sky is melting into warm tones of violet and orange. You can feel the day's heat radiating up from the stones, even as a light breeze nudges the scent of baked earth and cinnamon through the air. You pull your cotton shawl a little tighter, not because it's cold, don't flatter yourself, but because it helps block the last searing licks of sunlight from your shoulders. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not a noble. You're not even one of the scribes who gets to sit cross-legged and scribble royal decrees on clay tablets all day. You're more of a curious bystander, someone who's wandered into the edge of royal life, trailing behind a caravan delivering some unreasonably large baskets of pomegranates. You keep your head down just enough to stay out of trouble, but high enough to spot the edges of glory when it passes. Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, isn't your typical desert outpost. It's a polished jewel, all stone terraces and intricate carvings, with columns that seem to reach straight into the sky. Above, falcons circle lazily. Below, servants and architects shuffle like ants in sandals, each one performing some tiny, essential task. You'd think a place like this would be too busy conquering the world to care about sweets, but no, the Persians were nothing if not multitaskers, builders of empires, designers of gardens, and inventors of frozen desserts. You inch your way toward the central plaza. The light is softer here, the air a little cooler. It's no accident. Large slabs of polished stone and shaded colonnades help funnel what little breeze there is across the open spaces. It's the first lesson in Persian climate control. Shade is sacred. You pause to let a small procession pass. Servants carry baskets of mint, bundles of saffron, and wait, a clay jar packed in what looks like straw. It's sealed with linen, but you catch a faint scent as they go by. Rosewater. You almost trip over your own sandals. Could that possibly be cold in there? You follow at a respectful distance. They disappear into the palace's south wing, where the kitchens lie. Of course, kitchen is putting it mildly. This is more like a temple to flavor. Fires flicker under bronze pots. Men and women in light tunics stir, chop, whisper, and laugh. Smoke swirls, but it doesn't smell like burning, more like cumin, grilled lamb, and honeyed almonds. You edge toward a quieter corner where the real magic seems to be happening. A young woman with flour on her nose hums while she scrapes something from a ceramic bowl. Another gently fans a block of what looks like compacted snow. Snow! Here! In the middle of summer! You blink. Someone catches your eye. He's older, beard carefully oiled, wearing a gold-threaded sash. A head cook, maybe. He raises an eyebrow but doesn't shoo you away. "You look thirsty," he says, voice like gravel dipped in honey. You nod, because, well, yes, obviously. He gestures, and someone hands you a shallow bowl. Inside is a pale, icy mixture that glistens as it melts. You bring it close and breathe in. There's a hint of saffron,
a whisper of mint, and the unmistakable perfume of rose petals crushed just so. You take a spoonful. Your brain forgets how hot it is. You forget your name, the camels, and your dusty sandals. All that remains is cool sweetness, a burst of floral flavor, and the tiniest crunch of what might be crushed pistachio. You're not dreaming. This is Falud, an ancestor of sorbet, a miracle made of mountain snow, grape juice, and nature's perfume cabinet.
The cook chuckles. "It doesn't stay cold long," he says. "But then again, neither does life." You sit on the nearest stone ledge and savor every drop. Now, let's slow things down a little, because you're going to need context to appreciate just how ludicrous it is that you're eating proto-ice cream in ancient Persia. The Achaemenid Empire, ruled at this moment by Darius I, or maybe his charmingly complex son Xerxes, covers more land than any human power has before. From Egypt to the Indus Valley, they've managed to connect deserts, mountains, rivers, and cities into something that actually functions, sort of. And among all the war councils, road building, and scroll writing, someone looked around and said, "You know what would really tie this empire together? A little dessert." Historians still argue whether these chilled treats were a luxury only for the royals, or if upper-class Persians beyond the court could indulge as well. Some even suggest that the tradition may predate the Elamites, who once ruled this same patch of desert. You wonder if those first cooks had any idea what they were starting. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're just one happy mouthful away from licking the bowl. A temple bell rings in the distance. Shadows grow longer. The mountain winds have started whispering through the columns, and someone nearby lights a lantern laced with amber oil. You wipe your mouth, suddenly curious. Where did the snow come from? You're hundreds of miles from the nearest mountain that still holds snow in late summer. Transporting it here would be absurd. But then again, absurd is just another word for Persian ingenuity. You rise and tuck the empty bowl into a niche. The cook nods as you go. "Come back tomorrow," he says. "We're trying something with apricots." Your stomach growls in agreement, but your feet carry you onward, past the firelight and toward the western gate. Somewhere beyond those hills, the Zagros Mountains are beginning to cool. Snow still clings to their peaks like powdered sugar. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll find out just how that snow made its journey into your bowl. But for now, the stars are coming out, the wind smells of cinnamon and earth, and your eyelids are starting to droop under the sheer weight of it all. Don't worry, there's still so much more to taste.
You wake up early the next morning, if you ever really slept. The air is cool and surprisingly damp, and a thin layer of dew coats the flat stones beneath your feet. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crow echoes off the palace walls, sounding vaguely irritated to be alive. You stretch, rub your eyes, and remember the chilled dessert from last night. It wasn't a dream. Your tongue still remembers the soft crunch of ice crystals and that syrupy trace of rose and mint. So, naturally, today's quest is obvious. Find the snow. The sun isn't up yet, which works in your favor. You're less likely to be questioned if everyone else is still yawning and half blind. You sneak through the quiet streets on the edge of Persepolis, past vendors setting up carts and scribes mumbling to their reed pens. You've heard whispers, passed between porters and camel herders, of the ice runners, men who travel from mountain to city with the empire's coldest treasure. It sounds like a myth. Snow? In a climate where water evaporates off your skin before you even break a sweat? You figure it must be wildly impractical, meaning the Persians probably did it twice as often. You head toward the trade road, where early caravans are lining up. Mules blink sleepily under burlap hoods, and men sip thick date-sweetened tea from bronze cups.
You scan the crowd for someone who looks both tired and smug, someone who's clearly done something ridiculous and pulled it off. And there he is. A man with legs like olive trunks, a weathered face, and a sheepskin vest too warm for the morning chill. On his back is a lopsided crate bound in leather cords, and on top, a bit of frost still clings. Jackpot. You sidle up and casually comment on the weather. Bit cool for a desert morning, isn't it? He squints at you, then grins. You want to know about the snow, don't you? You don't deny it. He sets the crate down with a groan and props one foot on a nearby stone. We leave at dusk, always dusk. Travel by night, sleep in caves. The secret is in the insulation. And what insulation it is! Straw, burlap, layers of hardened felt soaked in bitter oil. They pack snow like spices, carefully layered and compressed, treated like treasure. The crate is a yak. Not a yak, mind you. That's a shaggy Himalayan bovine. A yak is a simple icebox made of clay and organic stuffing. One yak holds maybe a bushel of snow. Not much considering the size of an empire. The man, his name's Dariush, naturally, describes the trek. First, they hiked the base of the Zagros Mountains. By day, they rest in shaded ravines or wind-cooled caves. By night, they climb higher, through pine-scented air and crisp, stinging winds. When they reach the snow line, they work fast. The snow we take is old snow, packed tight, crusted over, not the soft, fluffy kind. You nod like that means something to you. They use wooden paddles to lift and break the snow into bricks, then wrap them in oiled goat hide. The blocks go into yaks, which go into saddlebags, which go onto donkeys or mules bred for the altitude. Then, without ceremony, they reverse the journey, hiking through desert nights, racing against the melt. Lose too much, and the kitchens won't pay, Daria shrugs. But make it in time, he taps the side of his nose. There's honey money in cold cargo. You ask him the obvious. How long does the snow last? He shrugs again. Depends. Sometimes 4 days, sometimes 5. Depends on the gods and the donkeys. You ask how long he's been doing it. Too long, he says with a dry chuckle. I can smell a snowdrift from 50 paces. It's impressive, and it gets more impressive the more you think about it. This isn't just a weird job, it's the logistics on a royal scale.
The Persians weren't just experimenting with frozen sweets. They were building a literal cold chain 2 millennia before refrigerators. Snow wasn't a novelty, it was an ingredient with a supply route. From mountaintop to palace table, the process was timed with military precision. You walk with Dariush a bit further as he prepares for his next run. He points to a cluster of stone outposts along the horizon. Those are the way stations, he explains. Simple shelters with built-in storage pits and shaded stalls. They serve both as rest stops and impromptu freezers. Snow stored underground, buried in straw, could survive a full moon cycle if the pit was deep enough and shaded well. Of course, he adds with a smirk, some fools try to speed up the route by cutting across the salt plains. Melted their whole cargo last spring. Just water and horseflies by the end. You wince. Historians still argue whether we stole the idea from the Medes, he adds as he tightens a strap. But I say we perfected it. He doesn't wait for a reply. A whistle sounds from up the road. The caravan is moving. Donkeys bray, men shout. Dariush hoists his crate like it's filled with feathers and disappears into the rising dust. You stand there for a while, just staring after him. A man whose life is ice and patience. By now, the sun is fully up. The spell of morning has broken, the day is already warming, and the sweet air of Persepolis has taken on the dusty tang of a city getting ready for business. You head back toward the palace with new appreciation. That bowl of icy sorbet you licked clean yesterday, it took 4 days, a mountain, a donkey, and a guy named Dariush to make it happen. You pass a group of palace children running through a fountain. One stops to sip from a clay cup filled with what looks like pomegranate ice slush. She holds it like a treasure, as if it's not just dessert, but proof that someone, somewhere, loves her enough to make it happen. You smile, suddenly wondering how many children in the empire will ever get that kind of treat. Then you realize something. If snow can survive the desert, if a dessert can survive 200 miles, Maybe you can survive this place too.
You leave the dust and donkey tracks behind and wander toward the palace kitchens. Not because you're hungry, though, let's be honest, that pomegranate snow would hit the spot, but because now you need answers. You've seen the end of the snow's journey and the man who carried it, but what about the middle? Who transforms this fast-melting luxury into the velvet cold treat that made your taste buds applaud? The palace kitchen isn't so much a room as it is a compound. You pass under a broad stone arch flanked by carved lions, their faces worn smooth from centuries of desert wind. Inside, it's a symphony of activity. Pounding mortars, hissing clay stoves, men and women in tunics fanning fires with what look like palm fronds the size of sails. And over it all, the scent. Oh, the scent. Roasted nuts, boiled honey, crushed cardamom, something faintly floral. You inhale so deeply you nearly tip over. A slim man in an apricot-stained apron notices your dazed state and chuckles. New here? You nod and blurt out something about snow and syrup and possibly, if you weren't dreaming, rose water. He nods, as if this is the most reasonable craving to have. You're talking about falure, I bet. He beckons you through a smoky side corridor. Falude. The word itself seems to melt off the tongue. He leads you to a quieter room, cooled with damp woven mats hanging from the doorframes. Here, 3 young assistants are turning giant stone bowls with wooden paddles. Inside, you see it. Crushed snow, gently mixed with a translucent nest of rice noodles. A thick syrup waits in a bronze pot nearby. Rose water, you're told, laced with lime and just a whisper of camphor. You don't cook this, he explains. You assemble it, build it slow like a poem. He spoons a bit onto a clay plate and offers you a taste. You do not decline. The noodles are slippery, the syrup sticky sweet, the snow crunches, then disappears like it was never there. It's not just food, it's sorcery. Refreshment that evaporates, leaving only satisfaction. As you savor it, he begins to explain how it all works. You learn that snow isn't used raw. No, it's sifted, yes, sifted through fine woven sieves to separate the crusty bits from the soft core. What's left is powdery perfection. Then it's layered with pre-cooked rice noodles made days earlier and stored in bundles wrapped with fig leaves to keep them cool. And the syrup, you ask? That's the art, he says proudly. Everyone has their own recipe. Mine was my grandmother's. Hers used orange blossom instead of rose, but the emperor prefers rose. Naturally, the emperor has preferences. You imagine him lounging on a jeweled couch, complaining that last week's falude was a touch too limey. You lean against a cool wall as your host, his name is Bahram, by the way, tells you more. He describes how they chill the bowls beforehand, storing them in underground chambers called sardabs. These are more than cellars. They're architectural marvels. Built deep into the ground, lined with porous bricks, and often placed beneath shaded courtyards, sardabs maintain a steady, cool temperature even when the outside bakes like a clay oven. Some even have wind catchers, bogiators, towering chimneys that funnel cool air down and pull hot air up. Ingenious, really. And here you thought your box fan was advanced. Bahram smiles as you gape. Historians still argue whether the first sardabs were designed for food or bodies, he says, rinsing his hands. But either way, we figured out how to keep cool long before we figured out how to boil water without burning it. He pulls out a small tablet. No, not the glowing kind. Clay, etched with tiny cuneiform marks. Inventory, he explains. Every batch is recorded, every snowbrick tracked, and every bowl accounted for. You realize with a start, this isn't a random treat for nobles. It's a regulated part of palace life. Ice cream in the desert, just another line item in a royal budget. You ask about accidents. What happens if a batch melts too fast? If the snow's too coarse? If the syrup spoils? He sighs. Then you don't sleep well that night. Sometimes you don't sleep at all. You spend the night replacing it with fig and honey paste and praying no one notices. You nod solemnly, as if you too have known the terror of serving room-temperature sorbet to royalty. Still, there's something else gnawing at you. Faluda is brilliant, but it's still a bit rustic. You're thinking of that smoother, creamier version you had last night. What was it called? Oh, you mean Bastani, the royal version. Your ears perk up. That's a different beast. We use chilled goat milk, churned over cold water until it thickens. Then we add mastic, saffron, bits of frozen cream, even pistachio if the shipment from the east made it. Mastic? You blink. Isn't that tree sap? It is, he says, delighted by your confusion. It gives the ice cream that stretchy, chewy texture, the mouthfeel of magic. You picture the process, churning milk over cold stone, adding flakes of frozen cream. Yes, they literally freeze cream, break it into pieces, and refreeze it inside the dessert. Why? Because they can. Because it's Persia. You ask how often they make bastani. For the court, weekly. For the common folk, he winks, only if they marry into the kitchen. A passing assistant trips, sending a cascade of almonds flying. No one shouts, no one scolds. Bahram just chuckles and picks up the mess himself. This isn't just a kitchen. It's a laboratory, a dance hall, a place where snow is a tool, not a miracle, where goat milk becomes silk, where desserts defy physics and flavor your dreams. You think of Darius again, dragging snow through deserts. You think of Bahram chilling bowls in underground tunnels. And you realize this isn't just about food. It's a system, a cold empire within the warm one.
The kitchen slowly fades behind you, the scent of rosewater lingering on your sleeves like perfume. But now you're curious about something else. Not the sweet bite of falude or the creamy chew of bastani, but how on earth all of this, the snow gathering, the saffron mixing, the freezing in a place where water boils just from looking at the sun, actually runs. Because this isn't a one-off feast, this is an operation. You walk into a different part of the complex, quieter, darker, and somehow cooler. A few turns later, and you're standing before a tall, domed structure, rising from the ground like an inverted teacup. Pale beige and baked hard by the sun, its strange curves cast long, sloping shadows that fall like soft fabric. This is a yakchal, an Persian ice house, one of dozens scattered across the empire, and the reason ice cream exists here at all. You enter slowly, your sandals crunching over gravel. The air changes immediately, drier, colder, like walking into a breath held in winter. The interior feels impossibly large, the ceiling high above vanishing into darkness. A thin shaft of light trickles down through a hole at the dome's apex, casting a spotlight over the deep pit in the center of the floor. "Don't fall," murmurs a voice behind you. It's the overseer. He carries a wax tablet, his fingers stained with charcoal ink. He's not much for introductions, but plenty for numbers. As he leads you along the inner ring, you realize the yakchal isn't just a big fridge. It's a marvel of thermal engineering. See, the walls aren't ordinary stone. They're made from a special mortar called saruj, a cocktail of clay, sand, egg whites, goat hair, lime, and ash. Sounds like a witch's recipe, sure, but it's genius. This mixture is both insulating and waterproof. Ice stays solid inside for months, even when the summer outside could cook an egg on marble. Beneath your feet lies a vast pit. Some yakchals go down as much as 5 stories deep. They're filled layer by layer with blocks of ice harvested during the cold season or brought down from the mountains. Between each layer is compacted straw or sawdust to slow the melt. But wait, why the dome? That's where the real sorcery kicks in. The conical shape does 2 things. It minimizes surface area exposed to the sun and helps hot air upward and out through the vent, drawing cooler air in from openings near the base. It's not refrigeration, it's air choreography.
You ask the overseer how many people work these domes. He says, it depends on the region. Some need 10 men for snow hauling, others only 3 to manage the melt runoff. But every yakchal has a guardian. A guardian? He nods. One person stays behind every night to monitor temperature shifts, water levels, and potential cracks. If the structure fails, you lose more than snow. You lose the court's desserts, and possibly your job, or worse. Historians still argue whether one yakchal collapse in Susa was sabotage or just bad geometry. You pause near a clay pipe embedded in the wall. It's part of a drainage system, he explains, designed to carry meltwater away into canals where it's either reused for gardens or frozen again if temperatures dip. But this isn't just practical. There's beauty in the symmetry, in the planning. A yakchal isn't a shed, it's a cathedral of cold, a quiet act of rebellion against the sun. Back outside, you find your breath almost steaming. It's warmer now, and the dome seems to shimmer under the sky like a mirage. You watch as men and women cart snow bricks into the base using padded sleds. One hums an old tune about a mountain bride who never melts. You suspect it's a metaphor.
You follow a trail of wet footprints to the small offices adjacent to the yakchal. There, on a low bench shaded by a cloth awning, sits an old man who introduces himself as Ardashir, an archivist of frozen things. He opens a leather scroll pouch and unfurls detailed maps, yes, maps, of yakchals across the empire. One in Ekbatana, another near Isfahan, even one out in the Far East in modern-day Afghanistan. They're placed like stars, he says, tapping little dots with a quill. Strategic, invisible. Without them, summer feasts would end in sweat and disappointment. You ask how they built them so precisely without modern tools. With ropes, shadows, and clever grandmothers, he laughs. Our ancestors watched the sun like it owed them money. A courier arrives, breathless, bearing a clay envelope sealed in wax. Ardashir cracks it open and scans quickly. Ah, the Shiraz dome reported seepage. I'll send repairs tomorrow. Then, casually, you want to see the construction process? Before you can answer, you're pulled into a new memory, a time before this dome was whole. You see workers layering sarouge in wide, sloping rings, children fetching water from a canal, an elder testing each brick by licking it. Yes, licking. If your tongue sticks too long, the mix is off. Back in the present, you blink. Ardashir is still talking. Most cities also built seasonal canals that directed cold spring water into shaded basins. Overnight, a thin ice layer would form, and they'd collect it at dawn. But that was only enough for the elite. If you wanted real reserves, enough for everyone, from the Shah to the street vendors, you needed a yakchal. And suddenly you realize something strange. This isn't just about storing snow. It's about organizing society around it. A yakchal isn't passive. It's political. Who gets snow first? Who decides the recipes? Who guards the vault? You wonder if anyone's ever fought over a snow brick. Then you remember last winter's office thermostat wars and decide the answer is absolutely. As the sun begins to sink, casting long shadows over the city, the overseer checks one last tablet and nods to you. You've seen the stomach of the operation, he says. Next, go see the nerves. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles faintly. The ones who decide what gets frozen and when. You glance one last time at the yakchal.
silent, imposing, slightly whimsical. A building dedicated to the impossible, keeping winter alive in the furnace of Persia.
You leave the yakshal behind, still feeling the ghost of its cool breath on your skin. But as the sun begins its slow descent over the rooftops of the city, the streets around you grow louder, livelier. Somewhere a camel snorts, a child laughs, someone drops a tray of copper bowls and curses under their breath. The city smells of spiced lamb and sweat, clay dust and pomegranate. You move through it like a breeze, barely noticed, but always drifting towards something more curious. You're headed toward the minds behind the cool, the thinkers, record keepers, and recipe tinkerers who turn frozen snow into culinary seduction. You're about to meet the food philosophers. They're not what you expect. You find them seated cross-legged in a shaded courtyard, surrounded by scrolls, platters of melon slices, and one half-melted bowl of something suspiciously creamy. These are the court culinarians, the sweetmakers, the seasonal strategists of ancient Persia, and they are deep in argument. "Rosewater is too forward for dates," insists one, waving a sticky spoon for emphasis. "Only if you have no nuance," retorts another, gently slapping his friend with a folded napkin. They pause when you step closer, then wave you in. Sit, learn, judge if you dare. You do sit, tentatively, on a cushion that smells faintly of cardamom. A platter is passed your way. It holds a small clay bowl filled with snow and pomegranate syrup. Your first bite sends a quiet shock through your jaw. Tart, sweet, and astonishingly cold. "We're experimenting," one of them says, "trying to figure out which ingredients survive freezing, which become bitter, and which disappear entirely." The conversation unfolds like dessert, slowly, deliberately, and with the occasional pit. You learn that creating cold dishes wasn't just about storing snow. It was about using it to transform texture and taste. Saffron, when mixed with chilled cream and reduced over a copper pan, turns golden and thick, like a silk blanket for your tongue. Rosewater enhances sweetness without overwhelming it, and pistachio, always toasted before blending. Always. One scroll describes a melon dish made with half-frozen goat yogurt and honey-thickened mulberry juice. Another details a sorbet using black cherries steeped in vinegar. And then there's the fabled almond milk snow syrup, said to be so soothing it was prescribed for heartbreak and mild heat stroke. Historians still argue whether these recipes came from royal palates or humble hands. Some believe court chefs merely refined the inventions of village cooks who froze fruit puree in mountain snow and served it to travelers. Others say the knowledge flowed the opposite way, downhill from royalty to the roadside. You look around the courtyard. A boy fans the fire under a clay oven where milk simmers gently. Another boy shaves flakes of musk from a small box, used as a flavoring, though its origin, from the glands of deer, is enough to make your stomach second-guess itself. "Don't worry," a cook chuckles. "You've probably already tasted worse on a modern menu." He's not wrong.
One of the men rolls out a scroll depicting a kind of schedule, a seasonal dessert calendar. You see dishes matched to the stars, the moon, even certain festivals. Some ingredients are considered cold in nature and only served in summer. Others are hot and believed to balance the body during colder months. You ask about ice cream, specifically. "Ah," says one elder, scratching his beard thoughtfully, "we didn't call it that, not yet. What we had was closer to bastani sonati, a traditional Persian chilled cream. Thickened with salep, stretched with mastic resin. It chews like taffy but melts like silk." He points to a sketch of what looks like ice being pounded in a large copper bowl while a second bowl, containing the cream mixture, is spun inside it. The trick is movement, he says. Spin it constantly, scrape the edges, stir it slow. Otherwise, you get icy lumps. No one likes icy lumps. Another cook chimes in, well, except my cousin. He eats it with pickled onion. The group groans in unison. Someone mutters, barbarian. You ask how people learned these techniques in the first place. Trade, one answers. Curiosity, says another. But the truth lies somewhere between. Persian culinary tradition didn't evolve in a vacuum. It was fed by routes that snaked from India, from China, from Greece. Dried ginger from the east, cinnamon from Ceylon, grape molasses from the west. All these flavors filtered into the hands of these experimental sweet makers who looked at a pile of snow and said, let's make it sing. You're handed a small wooden spoon dipped in creamy gold. This, you're told, is an early version of falude. The noodles are made from wheat starch, extruded by hand through a fine sieve, then laid out on chilled copper trays to firm. Once stiff, they're mixed with sugar syrup, lime juice, and sometimes crushed mint. The result? A whisper of summer lightning across your tongue, cool, crisp, euphoric. Perfect for heartbreak, someone adds, and also digestive upset. Because in ancient Persia, dessert wasn't just pleasure, it was medicine. Scrolls you read in the corner describe the cooling properties of frozen sweets, prescribed for patients with fevers, indigestion, and even bad dreams. A dish with melon and basil was believed to lift the mind's fog, while a chilled drink made from cucumber and vinegar was said to draw the heat from the bones. Of course, not every recipe worked. One failed experiment involving crushed figs and garlic was banned by court order after the smell cleared half the palace. A few dishes, however, were so loved they received their own poems. You're handed a crumbling page with faded ink. O snow of Shiraz, soft on my lips as lies, you melt in my mouth, yet cool the burn of my sighs. You raise an eyebrow. Someone shrugs. It's about a dessert, probably. The sun dips lower, casting golden stripes across the scrolls and faces. The cook closest to you wipes his hands on his robe and leans back. Tomorrow, he says, we test peach and almond, or maybe cucumber and quince. Someone grumbles, again with the cucumber. A gentle laugh rises among the group. Their rhythm is soft, unhurried, the kind of comfort that only comes from knowing what you make will not just nourish bodies, but linger in memory. You rise to leave, but one of them calls out, "Wait!" He hands you a small frost-dusted bowl and a spoon carved from fig wood. "For the road," he says with a wink. "Bust the knee with saffron and clotted cream." You nod your thanks and head into the narrowing twilight, spooning soft bites into your mouth, feeling the weight of centuries dissolve on your tongue. You've seen how the empire stores its snow, yes, but now you know what they do with it. They dream with it. And the next dream waits just around the corner, under the domes of medicine halls, where snow isn't just a dessert base, but a prescription.
The saffron ice cream still lingers on your tongue as you round a quiet corner and step into a different rhythm of Persian life. One where the smells of honey and rosewater give way to the sharp tang of antiseptics, burnt herbs, and something faintly metallic. You're heading into the medical quarters of the ancient Persian city, a place where snow doesn't just chill desserts, it soothes fevers, eases inflammation, and saves lives. The building before you looks humble, yet inside, a soft kind of authority hums. This is a Bimaristan, one of Persia's famed hospitals, and tonight you're not a patient, you're a silent observer. You enter through a side gate, flanked by clay basins of gently trickling water. The breeze is cooler here, scented with myrrh, mint, and dried lemon peels. You follow the stone corridor past rows of patients reclining on cushions.
Some moan, others doze. A young boy stirs crushed herbs in a bowl with surprising focus. A bearded man with deep smile lines catches your eye. "Thirsty?" he asks, offering you a ceramic cup of barley water, chilled with, yes, you guessed it, ice from the mountains. You sip, surprised. It's bland but refreshing, like drinking clean snow mixed with just the memory of grain. You follow him deeper into the halls. This man, a physician scholar with the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of balancing theory and practice, is about to show you something unusual: the cold room. It's not much to look at, just a shaded chamber with thick walls, a slanted floor, and copper containers resting in depressions along the edge. But this is where medical snow is kept. Each copper vessel holds compacted ice wrapped in straw or wool, then layered with herbs or oils depending on the treatment. The doctor explains that in Persian medicine, deeply influenced by Zoroastrian beliefs and the writings of Avicenna, everything revolves around balance: heat and cold, moisture and dryness. You, your temperament, your illness, they all fall somewhere on this compass. And snow is the universal corrector for excess heat. "Too much fire in the blood?" he asks, tapping a scroll. "Apply snow and vinegar compresses to the temples. Fever from too much black bile? Mix pomegranate juice with crushed ice and let the patient sip until the shivering begins." You raise an eyebrow. "Controlled shivering," he says, smiling. "Not hypothermia. We're healers, not torturers." He gestures toward a young woman lying quietly on a woven cot. A cloth rests on her forehead, soaked in cold rosewater and snowmelt. She winces occasionally, but her breathing is steady, calmer now. "She was vomiting from heat exhaustion," he explains. "Desert travel, nothing but dates and dried meat for 3 days." You glance around the shelves, stacked high with glass jars, cloth-wrapped herbs, and labeled powders. Among the ingredients, you spot crushed lotus seeds, powdered saffron, poppy resin, and a jar labeled simply "Snow, do not open." He winks. "That one's ceremonial, or cursed, depends who you ask." Historians still argue whether Persian cold therapy developed independently or inherited from neighboring civilizations. Some point to Babylonian clay tablets describing similar treatments. Others argue that the scale and systematization of Persian cooling practices, particularly with snow, were unmatched. Your host leads you to another chamber, the apothecary. Here, snow is ground down into slush, mixed with dried flowers, and poured into foot baths for patients with swollen legs. Another assistant shaves flakes of ice into a black syrup made from tamarind and sumac, used for those suffering from liver inflammation. In one corner, you see a bundle of cloth slowly steaming, snow wrapped in warm ginger tea-soaked linen. This bizarre mashup is for those suffering from both extremes, the doctor explains, hot-headed and cold-footed. You smirk. He shrugs. "It happens more than you'd think." He gestures for you to sit, then passes you another scroll. This one contains case notes, carefully inked records of patients treated with cold. One passage reads, "A merchant from Isfahan, afflicted by sunstroke after a week's journey. Presented with headache, yellow tongue, bitter breath. Applied crushed snow with mint oil to nape and feet. Recovery in 2 days. No relapse." Another reads, "A boy, 7 summers, plagued by night fevers. Prescribed chilled syrup of fig and barley. Refused to drink. Lured with promise of honey ice. Recovery unclear. Escaped to market stalls." Not every treatment is a success, clearly. But even failures are documented with care, a kind of scientific humility rare for the age. As the doctor flips through more notes, he muses aloud. "We used to treat everything with heat, burn it out, sweat it out, purge with fire. Then we noticed something strange. people who lived near mountain springs fell sick less, so we listened. We studied snow. It becomes clear that this man, and many like him, saw ice not as a luxury, but a fundamental tool of balance. The snow brought in from Yakchals wasn't just for the palaces and poets, it was for the people, the sick, the overheated, the nearly gone. You ask how they kept the snow from melting too fast, especially in warm rooms like these. He nods, pleased by your curiosity. Ah, that's where engineering meets medicine. He leads you to the roof, where a series of clay pipes curve downward and vanish into the floor below. These carry water cooled by night air and shaded channels, he says. The walls are thick with straw insulation, and in the basement, we have something special. He motions for you to follow again, down a narrow staircase to a subchamber so cold your breath frosts slightly. There, in the center of the room, sits a shallow stone basin lined with blue tiles. Meltwater slowly drips from the ceiling above, cooling the room passively. This room, he says, is for our most fragile, those whose bodies burn from within. We bring them here, lay them on padded benches, and let the cold do what heat cannot. He pauses, then adds softly, "It saved more than a few." There's a quiet reverence in the space, a stillness that feels earned, not forced. You begin to understand that in this world, the line between dessert and medicine is thinner than you thought. That snow, simple, ancient snow, was not just entertainment or indulgence. It was science. It was salvation. As you leave the cold chamber, you spot a small painted tile embedded near the exit. It shows a man lying beneath a mountain, his head crowned with a single flake of snow. The inscription reads, "The heat leaves when the snow stays." Back in the open air, the doctor clasps your shoulder. "Come back in winter. We treat coughs with snow-packed oranges. Quite soothing, very messy." You thank him and step back into the city's evening pulse, the scent of tamarind and snow still clinging to your memory. Ahead lies the marketplace, where merchants cry out for customers and claim to sell the rarest spices, the coldest syrups, the fluffiest saffron ices. But beyond that, deeper still, lies the royal kitchen. And in it, something glorious is churning.
The evening air thickens as you meander toward the palace district. The city slows, hushed by twilight. Oil lamps flicker behind carved wooden screens, their glow warm and inviting. Somewhere in the distance, a woman sings, a slow, spiraling lullaby in Old Persian. And right in front of you stands a pair of heavy cedarwood doors, latticed with bronze and marked with the crest of the Achaemenid royal kitchens. You push the door open, quietly, like a guest who doesn't want to startle the host. Inside, the scent hits you first: cardamom, cinnamon, burnt sugar, and something colder, crisper: snow-sweetened air. You're inside the palace kitchens now, and while most of the fires have gone out for the night, a few workers still bustle about, their footsteps soft against stone. This is the world of elite culinary alchemy, where food isn't just nourishment, it's reputation, legacy, politics. And in ancient Persia, the art of dessert was no small thing, especially when it came to ice. One young cook waves you over. He's scraping something into a shallow brass dish, long strokes with a wide blade. You peek over. A golden paste, saffron and sugar, and underneath, slivers of chipped ice. "Sharbat," he says, barely glancing up, "for tomorrow's feast." He nods toward a stack of clay jars marked with faded ink symbols. "Chilled with snow from Ecbatana," he adds, casually, as if it were no more exotic than water from the well. Ecbatana, that distant city perched in the mountains, was one of Persia's great summer capitals. It was also a major supplier of snow. packed in straw-lined camel caravans and shipped all the way to Persepolis and Susa. Getting it here before it melted, that was the tricky part. Snow was wrapped in woven reeds, sealed in tar-coated containers, and hurried through shaded routes known only to royal couriers. Historians still argue whether these snow routes were precursors to organized cold supply chains or whether they were more ad hoc, run by ice smugglers with strong backs and no shortage of bravado. Either way, the goal was the same: to deliver enough frozen treasure for the king's table. And what did the king do with it? He ate it, of course, but not just in one form. The cook gestures toward a table laid with ingredients: rose petals, pomegranate seeds, crushed almonds, tamarind pulp, pistachios, dried apricots, orange blossoms, honeycomb. Each one destined for some ice-based confection that wouldn't look out of place in a modern luxury cafe. One young cook holds up a jar of amber-hued syrup. Date molasses, he whispers reverently, churned with snow, reserved for nobility. You watch as they pour it over shaved ice, stir quickly, and present it in a wide copper dish topped with what looks suspiciously like candied violets. You take a cautious taste. It's soft, mellow, with that strange Persia meets polar sensation. Not quite ice cream, not quite sorbet, more like frozen perfume with a backbone of desert dates. Nearby, another worker grates cucumber into yogurt. He explains, a savory ice, for hot nights when the king cannot sleep. You raise your eyebrows. He shrugs. We all get restless. The kitchen master appears now, a broad-shouldered man with flour on his robes and eyes sharp as a falcon's. He carries a scroll in one hand and a bundle of dried jasmine in the other. New recipe, he mutters, from a Greek envoy. You trail him to the preparation bench, where he unrolls the scroll. A diagram shows a layered dessert: snow, honey, cheese, and fig syrup. Ridiculous, he snorts, but intriguing. The Persians weren't afraid of borrowing good ideas, especially when it came to food. From India came sweetened rice milk. From Babylon, dates. From Egypt, tamarind and fenugreek. And from Greece, a growing obsession with fruit syrups poured over snow. Tonight, the kitchen staff are experimenting. You watch as they build a new kind of dish: layers of crushed ice, saffron threads, almond milk custard, and a drizzle of pomegranate molasses. Then the final touch: a crumble of roasted chickpea flour. An unlikely blend, but somehow it works. You steal another bite and immediately regret not bringing a bucket. Even the tools here are engineered for ice work: slotted spoons to drain melting water, double-walled pots to delay towing, and fans to direct airflow. The engineering is impressive, almost obsessive. And it has to be. In a place where the average summer day could boil an egg on the pavement, every snowflake counts. You ask about failures. Surely not every dessert was a masterpiece. The kitchen master sighs. We once tried freezing lentils. It became gum. He waves you into a side room, cooler and darker. Here, shallow bowls rest atop clay pedestals. They're rotating, manually, slowly. Each one contains a mixture of goat milk, rosewater, and sugar, being stirred and cooled over snow. This, you realize, is as close as it gets to ancient Persian ice cream. Not the churned milk fat block you're used to, not scooped, not topped with rainbow sprinkles, but still ice cream. And the technique? It's brilliant. Snow below, spinning above, constant agitation. The secret to smoothness. Of course, the master adds, the king prefers it with gold leaf and raisins from Armenia. Naturally. You ask about presentation.
What does a royal ice dish look like? He grins and gestures to a nearby cart being loaded for the palace banquet. On it, a centerpiece, a pyramid of frozen melon slices, stacked like a miniature mountain. Hollowed slightly in the center, there, nestled within, lies a glowing orb of pomegranate sorbet, topped with candied rose petals and what might be crushed pearl. Too much, he asks. You nod. Definitely. And yet, it's beautiful, regal, dreamlike. You linger as they pack the final dishes, wrapping them in snow-lined baskets, ready to be carried upstairs for tonight's gathering. And it occurs to you, this isn't just dessert, it's diplomacy. Guests from across the empire come to these feasts, and each icy bite whispers, "Look what we can do in the middle of a desert. We freeze time, we tame heat, we serve winter on command." That's power, and it tastes like jasmine and honey. As you prepare to leave, a young apprentice hands you a final bowl. He says, "For the road, sour cherry ice with a splash of vinegar, it wakes you up." You take a spoonful, tart, cold, bright. Your toes tingle. Outside, the night deepens, and stars bloom across the sky like frost across glass. The palace behind you hums with laughter, music, and the soft clink of spoons on copper bowls. You smile. Time to find out how the empire kept the snow coming.
The cool night air brushes against your skin as you step away from the fragrant palace kitchens, still tasting the sharp sweetness of sour cherry ice. Now, your journey takes you to the rugged mountain city of Ecbatana, nestled high in the Zagros range, Persia's winter wonderland, and the ancient source of all that precious snow. You imagine those towering peaks, wrapped in clouds and kissed by cold winds, where winter's grip lingers long after the desert below has surrendered to relentless heat. Here, the snow doesn't just fall, it's collected, treasured, and sent on a remarkable voyage across hundreds of miles of blazing sun. Ecbatana's reputation was no secret. Even before the Achaemenid Empire stretched its mighty arms, this city had been famed for its snow stores and winter festivals. You might picture local tribes, rugged, weather-beaten, clad in heavy woolen cloaks, digging deep pits lined with straw and mud bricks, carefully packing layers of fresh snow and ice, then sealing them tight with clay lids to preserve the chill. These pits, called yakshals, are ancient marvels of refrigeration. Engineers still argue whether they were primarily for food storage or ice preservation, but their design is undeniably ingenious. Standing tall like earthen pyramids, with thick insulating walls and subterranean storage chambers, yakshals kept ice frozen throughout the summer months without modern technology. And it's from these very pits that Persia's ice supply began its long, arduous trek southward. The snow was packed into clay jars, fragile yet surprisingly durable, then wrapped in layers of insulating reeds and wool. The caravans that transported them had to move swiftly but carefully, constantly shaded from the sun, traveling mostly at night to avoid the heat. Imagine the caravan leader, a seasoned nomad with sun-cracked skin, leading a dozen camels loaded with these frozen treasures. Each camel carries precious jars wrapped in straw, stacked like fragile gems. The caravan's route twists through narrow mountain passes, across rocky deserts, and finally into the heart of the empire. Historians still argue whether these caravans traveled primarily for palace use or also supplied local markets in Persian cities. Some texts hint at specialized cold merchants, ice traders, who monopolized the trade and wielded considerable influence, their fortunes rising and falling with the availability of snow. Along the way, the caravan guards would sip cooling sharbat, a syrupy drink mixed with snow, to stave off the desert heat and maintain alertness. The sweet, chilled beverage was both practical and a reminder of what they were safeguarding.
But the journey was fraught with challenges. Sandstorms could bury the path, camels could stumble on rocky terrain, and rival tribes sometimes attempted to intercept the cargo. Yet the promise of ice in the desert was motivation enough to endure these hardships. Upon arrival in Persepolis or Susa, the jars were immediately unloaded and placed in specialized ice houses, shaded vaulted structures designed to prolong the frozen state. Often, these ice houses were built near springs or underground channels, using evaporative cooling techniques that modern engineers find fascinating. It might surprise you that such early cooling methods relied heavily on natural materials and clever architecture, proving that ancient Persians weren't just masters of empire building, they were early pioneers in climate control. The daily life of those who managed this snow supply was complex. Ice makers had to monitor temperatures constantly, replacing melted snow with fresh batches and ensuring the supply never ran low. The workers' schedules revolved around the seasons and celestial cycles, timing the shipments to arrive before the summer peak heat. Interestingly, some royal decrees forbade ordinary citizens from accessing these snow stores, reserving them strictly for the nobility. This exclusivity added to the prestige of frozen delicacies, making them a symbol of wealth and power. In quieter moments, you can imagine workers chatting by candlelight, sharing stories of the caravan journeys, and perhaps debating the merits of different snow preservation techniques. Some swear by layering thin sheets of goat wool between snowpacks. Others champion the use of specific types of straw or clay. A particularly quirky practice involved sprinkling a little salt on the snow layers, a technique said to lower the freezing point and slow melting, a method still used today in ice making. And then there's the question of how these methods influenced neighboring cultures. The ancient Greeks, for example, adopted certain snow preservation practices after interactions with Persia, while Indian texts described early sorbet-like desserts that might owe a debt to Persian innovation. But exactly how much influence Persia had on the broader history of frozen treats remains a subject of scholarly debate. What's certain is that without Ecbatana's snow, the rich array of desserts and icy concoctions enjoyed in the palaces could never have existed. You pause, imagining the journey of those tiny snowflakes from mountain peak to royal banquet table, transforming from cold crystals into silky sherbets and creamy frozen custards. It's a transformation that took knowledge, skill, and no small amount of daring. As you watch the sun start to lighten the horizon, you prepare to follow the trail back to the kitchens, eager to uncover how these snowy treasures were turned into the earliest versions of ice cream, Persian style.
As dawn stretches its pale fingers over the horizon, you find yourself once again amidst the bustling heart of the empire, this time within the vibrant marketplace of Susa. The air is thick with spices, fresh bread, and the murmur of merchants hawking their wares. But your attention is drawn to a quieter corner, where a small group gathers around a modest stall specializing in icy refreshments, the forerunners of Persian ice cream. You watch a vendor skillfully scraping fine flakes of ice into a shallow bowl, layering it with thick yogurt, fragrant rose water, and a drizzle of honey. This humble treat, known as falude, delights both the young and old, its delicate texture and floral notes a perfect antidote to the rising heat. Falude is one of the earliest known frozen desserts, and it's said that the ancient Persians perfected it long before ice cream as we know it existed. The key lies in its unique combination of rosewater-infused syrup and thin noodles made from starch, a curious texture that dances between solid and liquid, cold and sweet. Historians still argue whether falude originated purely in Persia or whether it was influenced by similar desserts in neighboring regions. Some suggest that the technique of combining starch noodles with syrup may have come from Indian or Central Asian traditions. But what's clear is that Persia embraced and refined the concept into something uniquely its own. You take a moment to savor the sensory experience, the icy shards melting gently on your tongue, the subtle floral perfume of rose,
and the faint crunch of thin noodles. It's soothing, refreshing, and strangely comforting. Beyond the sweets themselves, you're struck by the social role these frozen treats played. Unlike the luxurious, exclusive desserts reserved for royalty, vendors like this brought cold relief to everyday people. Markets would fill with the laughter of children enjoying icy delights, and the elderly would pause to sip cooling drinks, momentarily escaping the desert's relentless heat. But there's more to these icy vendors than just treats. They were hubs of gossip, news, and community. Sharing a bowl of falude or a cup of sharbat wasn't just about refreshment, it was about connection. And there's a quirky tradition you overhear about the vendors. Some would flavor their ice with unusual ingredients: saffron-infused milk, ground almonds, or even crushed pistachios. To stand out among the competition, one vendor proudly claims to have invented an ice mixed with the essence of violet petals, a scent so delicate it was said to lull patrons into a peaceful reverie. This interplay between flavor and mood wasn't accidental. Ancient Persians believed that certain tastes and aromas could soothe the spirit and ease insomnia, a notion that echoes in modern aromatherapy. The connection between ice and sleep is more than poetic. The cooling sensation of icy desserts is thought to lower body temperature slightly, making it easier to drift off. Whether or not ancient Persians consciously knew this, their culinary innovations certainly had a relaxing effect on consumers. You also learn about the role of buffalo milk, prized for its richness and creaminess in making frozen dairy treats. Buffalo milk was often mixed with fruit syrups and frozen using snow, creating early frozen custards that rivaled anything found in modern gelaterias. The daily routine of these vendors was a delicate balancing act, harvesting enough snow or ice from palace stores, preserving it through the day, and preparing fresh batches of frozen treats that wouldn't melt too quickly in the desert sun. Their tools were simple: earthenware bowls, handheld graters, and wooden paddles for stirring. There's a charming story about a vendor who invented a spinning wooden device to churn milk and snow faster, making the mixture smoother. Some scholars speculate this was an early prototype of the modern ice cream churn, though this remains hotly debated. What's clear is that these humble artisans laid the groundwork for centuries of frozen dessert traditions, blending Persian ingenuity with local ingredients and tastes. You notice a mother handing her child a bowl of icy rose-petal falude, the child's eyes wide with delight. It's a simple moment, yet deeply human. Proof that the desire for sweet cold treats transcends time and place. As the market hums around you, you realize that the ancient Persian invention of ice cream wasn't just a culinary milestone. It was a cultural phenomenon that brought joy, relief, and community to a vast and varied empire. And with that thought warming your heart, you prepare to follow the story onward, into the realm of royal ceremonies and festive banquets, where ice cream becomes not only a treat, but a symbol of power and sophistication.
The palace gates swing open before you, ushering you into a world of marble columns, intricate mosaics, and gardens bursting with fragrant jasmine and orange blossoms. Here, in the opulent courts of the Achaemenid kings, ice cream is elevated from humble market fare to a luxurious delicacy, a symbol of status, wealth, and the empire's mastery over nature itself. Imagine yourself seated on a low divan beside the royal pool, the warm Persian sun filtered through finely woven silk curtains. Servants glide quietly by, carrying silver trays laden with bowls of creamy, chilled treats flavored with exotic ingredients: saffron, pistachios, and the ever-popular rose water. The air is thick with the mingled scents of fresh herbs, perfumed oils, and the sweet hint of melting snow. It's here that the story of Persian ice cream reaches its zenith, where culinary artistry meets imperial ceremony. Ancient texts describe royal feasts featuring sharbat, cool syrups poured over crushed ice, and frozen desserts served with music and poetry. The preparation of these treats was a closely guarded secret, often entrusted to specialized ice masters who knew how to combine the precise ratios of milk, sugar, and snow to create the perfect texture. Historians still argue whether these early frozen delicacies should be classified as ice cream in the modern sense, since the churned, creamy consistency we expect today may have been a later development. Nevertheless, the innovation of using snow combined with dairy and flavorings to produce a frozen treat was undeniably Persian. One particularly quirky royal custom involved the use of marvash, a type of edible gum or resin that was added to ice cream mixtures. This ingredient, you learn, helped to thicken the frozen concoction and give it a chewiness unlike anything else. Some court poets even wrote verses praising the marvash's sweet embrace, suggesting that enjoying ice cream was almost a sensual experience. The role of the royal ice masters was critical, and they often enjoyed privileged positions in court. These artisans developed elaborate methods to maintain the ice supply, using underground chambers lined with thick mud bricks and straw for insulation. They also devised cooling vessels made of porous clay, which kept water chilled through evaporation, a precursor to modern refrigeration techniques. You might chuckle at the fact that some royal ice masters were rumored to have invented early forms of refrigeration gadgets, like primitive hand-cranked churns or clay pots suspended over cool water, though evidence remains scant and debated by scholars. The sumptuousness of these icy treats was only matched by the lavishness of their presentation. Bowls were often decorated with edible gold leaf or sprinkled with crushed nuts and dried fruits. Guests at court enjoyed their desserts while reclining on cushions, the cool flavors offering a welcome respite from the desert heat. Beyond the palace walls, the cultural significance of ice cream extended into celebrations and festivals. During Nowruz, the Persian New Year, special frozen desserts were prepared as symbols of renewal and abundance. Sharing these treats was an act of hospitality and goodwill. You're struck by how ice cream in ancient Persia was not merely about flavor or refreshment, it was a reflection of the empire's grandeur, its command of resources, and its ability to bend nature to human desire. In quieter moments, you imagine the conversations among courtiers, marveling at the cool sweetness as they debated poetry or politics. One courtier might joke, "This ice cream is so cold it might just freeze the king's temper." Another could muse about the strange and wonderful properties of snow in a land of sun. As the afternoon sun softens, you catch a glimpse of the gardeners tending to beds of mint and lemon verbena, herbs destined to flavor future batches of ice cream. It's a reminder that every frozen spoonful is a blend of earth, water, and human ingenuity. Historians still debate exactly how these royal ice creams influenced neighboring cultures, such as the Greeks and Romans. But there's little doubt that Persia's innovations set the stage for a global love affair with frozen desserts. You settle deeper into the cushions, feeling the cool breeze and the gentle hum of palace life around you, ready to follow this chilling story next into the shadows of the medieval world, where ice cream's legacy takes surprising new turns. The sun dips low behind distant minarets as you find yourself stepping forward in time into the winding alleyways and bustling bazaars of medieval Persia and its neighboring regions. The empire's ancient ice cream tradition has transformed and traveled, weaving itself into the everyday lives of people far beyond the royal courts. Now, ice cream is no longer just a luxury. It's an accessible pleasure for those who know where to find it. You stroll past wooden carts parked beside tea houses, where vendors ladle scoops of frozen sweets into delicate bowls. The air carries a sweet floral perfume, mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly brewed tea. And you notice children eagerly tugging their parents toward these icy treasures. During this period, the methods of making ice cream continued to evolve. Snow was still harvested from nearby mountains or stored in deep pits, but now it was often mixed with new ingredients like sour cherry syrup or pomegranate juice. These tangy additions gave the cold desserts a playful zing, enlivening the palate in a way that both surprised and delighted. Historians still debate the exact timeline of when sugar began to replace honey as the main sweetener in Persian frozen desserts. Some argue that sugar cultivation's rise in the region accelerated this shift, while others believed that honey remained dominant in rural areas for centuries longer. Regardless, the sweetness you taste today carries echoes of both these natural sugars. One particularly quirky custom you overhear about involves the use of dried rose petals sprinkled atop ice cream, not just for decoration, but for their supposed calming properties. It was believed that inhaling the delicate fragrance could soothe restless minds, an early form of edible aromatherapy, if you will. In this medieval context, the role of ice cream vendors expanded beyond simple merchants. They became neighborhood fixtures, integral to community life and social gatherings. Sharing a frozen treat was a way to bond, to celebrate, and sometimes to escape the day's worries, if only for a moment. You also discover that ice cream was often consumed alongside fragrant herbal teas, creating a balance of hot and cold sensations believed to aid digestion. This pairing might sound unusual now, but it was deeply rooted in Persian ideas of balancing the body's humors, a concept akin to medieval European medicine. In the sprawling gardens of Shiraz, poets waxed lyrical about the fleeting pleasure of ice cream melting on the tongue, likening it to the ephemeral nature of beauty and youth. One verse, softly repeated by a passing traveler, compares a spoonful of saffron ice cream to a golden sunset caught in winter's grasp. Medieval Persian artisans also experimented with new textures and presentations. One eccentric inventor reportedly created ice cream frozen inside hollowed-out fruits, such as pomegranates and quinces, making each serving a miniature edible vessel of cold delight. Whether this was practical or just fanciful storytelling remains a subject of debate among scholars. You pause to consider the ingenious ways ice was preserved. The ancient yakchal, or ice pit, continued to be used, but now designs included deeper subterranean chambers and wind-catching towers that cooled water before freezing. These ingenious structures were marvels of engineering, ancient air conditioning, if you like. The social dynamics of ice cream consumption also reveal fascinating insights. While the wealthy could afford delicate flavors and ornate vessels, ordinary folk often improvised with what they had, crushing ice to chill sour milk or mixing snow with wild fruit juices picked from the mountains. One delightful account tells of a traveling storyteller who carried a small container of frozen sherbet on his journeys, sharing it with appreciative audiences after long days on the road. It was a gift of cool comfort and fleeting luxury that transcended class and geography. As the twilight deepens and the cool night breeze brushes your skin, you reflect on how ice cream has been a gentle companion through the centuries, comforting, refreshing, and connecting people across divides. This legacy, born in ancient deserts and nurtured in medieval markets, whispers promises of future innovations. You feel a sense of quiet anticipation as you prepare to trace the story into early modern times, when new worlds, new ingredients, and new technologies will reshape the frozen treat forever.
The gentle hum of a distant caravan echoes as you find yourself standing at the crossroads of the early modern era, where ancient Persian traditions meet the dawning of global exploration and cultural exchange. This period breathes new life into the story of ice cream, with fresh ingredients and innovative techniques sparking exciting transformations. You picture a bustling port city where ships from Europe, Asia, and Africa unload spices, fruits, and sugars never before known in Persia's deserts. Exotic flavors like vanilla from the Americas and cocoa from distant lands begin to mingle with the age-old saffron and rosewater. It's a time when the ice cream's palate expands far beyond anything imagined by earlier generations. Historians still argue over the extent to which Persian ice cream directly influenced European frozen desserts, but there's little doubt that travelers, merchants, and scholars carried knowledge of frozen treats along the Silk routes. Some say the famed Italian gelato has roots in these Persian innovations, though this remains a delicious scholarly debate. At the heart of these innovations is the growing availability of refined sugar, which revolutionizes the texture and sweetness of frozen desserts. This refinement allows makers to experiment with creamier, smoother consistencies, moving closer to what we think of today as ice cream. You overhear a lively conversation at a tea house where a vendor proudly describes his new recipe, a luscious blend of cream, sugar, and crushed ice flavored with a hint of cardamom. The patrons, intrigued, agree that this is a treat fit for the burgeoning coffee culture spreading across the region. Curiously, early modern Persian ice cream makers also incorporated unusual stabilizers like gum tragacanth and even ground orchid root. These additives improved texture and helped prevent ice crystallization, a clever technique that keeps the dessert silky smooth. You learn about a remarkable invention, the hand-cranked ice cream churn, a device that made the freezing process faster and more uniform. While its origins are debated, some historians believe that Persian craftsmen developed early versions of this technology, blending mechanical ingenuity with culinary art. Beyond technology, the social scene around ice cream also evolves. Ice cream parlors begin to emerge in cities like Isfahan and Tabriz, serving as gathering places for poets, philosophers, and merchants. These establishments become centers of conversation and creativity, much like coffee houses in Europe. One charming custom you discover involves serving ice cream alongside dried fruits and nuts, enhancing both texture and flavor. Imagine biting into a cool scoop, followed by a chewy date or a crunchy almond, a sensory duet that delights the palate and offers a satisfying contrast. There's also a quirky story about a wealthy noble who supposedly had ice cream delivered daily by his servants in insulated containers made from goat skins. This precursor to the modern cooler ensured his favorite treat remained perfectly chilled no matter the season. These early modern innovations also coincide with changing ideas about health and medicine. Persian physicians of the time recommended ice cream as a remedy for fevers and digestive ailments, praising its cooling and calming effects. Whether it worked or not, consuming ice cream was certainly a pleasurable prescription. As dusk falls and lanterns begin to glow, you notice the balance between tradition and novelty. Ice cream remains a symbol of Persia's ancient ingenuity, yet it eagerly embraces new influences and technologies from across the globe. You feel the excitement of this era, sensing that the story of Persian ice cream is far from over. The seeds planted centuries ago are blossoming into a worldwide phenomenon that will continue to delight and refresh generations to come. With that thought, you prepare to step into the next chapter, following ice cream's journey through the 19th and 20th centuries, where modernization, industrialization, and globalization reshape it beyond recognition. The gentle clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the distant whistle of steam engines transport you into the 19th and early 20th centuries, a period where ancient Persian ice cream traditions meet the relentless march of modernization and industrialization. You find yourself wandering through a city transformed by new technologies and ideas, where ice cream, once a rarefied royal treat, is becoming a beloved staple enjoyed by many. In this era, Persia, like much of the world, is undergoing profound change. Railways snake through the countryside, connecting distant towns, and factories hum with new machinery. These developments influence the production and distribution of ice cream in ways earlier generations could scarcely imagine. You stroll past emerging ice cream shops lining the city streets, their glass windows showcasing colorful frozen treats, pistachio green, rose pink, saffron yellow, drawing eager customers inside. These shops, often family-run, represent the democratization of ice cream. What was once reserved for kings and nobles now delights merchants, scholars, and children alike. One mainstream historical fact stands out here. The invention and spread of mechanical refrigeration profoundly changed ice cream production worldwide. Persian merchants quickly adopted ice-making machines, allowing ice cream to be produced year-round, no longer dependent on mountain snow or seasonal cold pits. This revolutionized accessibility and freshness. A quirky tidbit you discover is that Persian ice cream makers adapted these new machines to create an especially dense and chewy variety known as bastani sonati, incorporating salep, powdered wild orchid root, and mastic resin. This ice cream's distinctive stretchy texture fascinated European visitors, who sometimes called it Persian gum ice cream. Historians still debate whether this unique texture was truly an ancient tradition revived or a clever 19th century innovation, but the chewy charm of bastani sonati remains unmistakably Persian. You watch as vendors skillfully scoop this frozen treat, often garnished with crushed pistachios and rose petals, serving it alongside cups of fragrant tea. A comforting ritual that links past and present. Social customs around ice cream also evolve. You overhear stories of families gathering in the evenings at ice cream parlors, discussing politics, poetry, and the latest technological marvels. Ice cream is not just a food, it's a social lubricant, a sweet pause amid rapid change. Interestingly, some conservative voices in society criticized the new commercial ice cream shops, worried that these sugary treats might distract youth from traditional values or lead to unhealthy habits, a strikingly similar debate to modern conversations about fast food. You smile at the notion that even centuries ago, ice cream was stirring up mild controversy, proving that no matter the era, it's always been a treat worth talking about. During this time, Persia also experiences the influence of European culinary trends. Ice cream recipes began to incorporate creamier bases and new flavor combinations like chocolate and vanilla, imported along with sugar and dairy farming techniques. Yet, Persian ice cream makers retained their unique identity, often blending local ingredients like saffron, rosewater, and cardamom into these newer styles, preserving a link to heritage amid modernization. You take a moment to appreciate how this era embodies a beautiful balance, respecting tradition while embracing innovation, much like a carefully crafted scoop of ice cream, blending ancient flavors with new textures. As night falls and the city lights flicker on, you imagine the countless hands, farmers, artisans, shopkeepers,
that keep this centuries-old tradition alive and thriving. With this thought, you prepare to follow ice cream's story into the contemporary era, where globalization and technology bring fresh challenges and opportunities for Persia's frozen legacy.
You awake to the soft glow of modern city lights, blending with the call to prayer drifting through the evening air. Stepping into the present day, where the ancient Persian ice cream tradition thrives amid globalization, technology, and shifting cultural landscapes. Here, the echoes of history blend seamlessly with the buzz of contemporary life. Walking through Tehran's lively streets, you notice neon signs illuminating ice cream shops that proudly declare their heritage. Traditional Bastani Sonati is still served alongside trendy new flavors like saffron pistachio gelato or rosewater mango sorbet, bridging past and present in every scoop. A mainstream fact worth savoring: today's Persian ice cream shops often combine centuries-old recipes with modern machinery, using state-of-the-art freezers and mixers while still employing natural stabilizers like salep and mastic to maintain that signature chewy texture. One quirky modern tidbit involves the resurgence of ice cream fights during Nowruz, the Persian New Year. This playful tradition, where friends toss scoops of ice cream at each other, blends celebration with a sense of communal joy. Imagine a frosty, sticky version of a snowball fight under springtime skies. Historians still debate how much the Iranian diaspora has influenced the global popularity of Persian ice cream. While some argue that Iranian emigrants helped spread these unique frozen desserts worldwide, others point to parallel developments in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cuisines. Either way, Persian ice cream is undeniably carving a global niche. You pause to consider the sustainability challenges facing modern ice cream production: climate change affecting dairy farms, water use concerns, and the search for eco-friendly packaging. Many artisan makers in Iran now emphasize organic ingredients and traditional methods to honor their heritage responsibly. In the cafes, conversations drift toward the fusion of Persian ice cream with global trends. Some vendors experiment with vegan versions using coconut milk, while others blend ancient spices with modern superfoods like matcha or acai. The tradition, you realize, is as adaptable as it is enduring. You spot a young couple sharing a cone topped with rosewater ice cream and crunchy pistachios, their laughter blending with the city's night sounds. It's a small moment, but one that captures the essence of this centuries-old treat: connection, comfort, and joy. Behind the scenes, you learn that scientific research into salep's unique properties continues, with some studies suggesting health benefits from its prebiotic fiber content. Yet there's also debate about the environmental impact of wild orchid harvesting, prompting efforts to cultivate sustainable alternatives. Your thoughts drift to the yakchals, those ancient Persian ice houses, many now restored as cultural heritage sites. They stand as silent monuments to human ingenuity, reminding you that long before modern freezers, people dreamed of cooling relief amid the desert heat. As your journey nears an end, you reflect on how ice cream's story is a microcosm of Persian history itself, rooted in innovation, shaped by cultural exchange, and ever-evolving. With a final glance at the bustling streets, you feel a soothing sense of continuity. The same desert winds that once carried whispers of snow and sweet syrups still ripple through the lives of those who cherish this ancient frozen delight. Next, you'll settle into the final section, a gentle wind-down to ease your mind and invite restful sleep.
just as the story has gently cooled and comforted you.
The world around you slows as the night deepens, and you feel yourself gently carried toward rest, wrapped in the soft embrace of centuries-old stories and the quiet magic of ice cream invented in a desert long ago. You've traveled through time and space, tasting history's sweet, cooling moments, and now it's time to soften the edges and drift gently away. Imagine the early Persians gazing at the stars above their desert homes, knowing that somewhere beneath the sands, cold snow awaited, transformed into a delicacy that would soothe heat and spirits alike. Picture those same families tonight, centuries later, sharing a quiet bowl of Bastani Sanati beneath modern city lights, a living link between past and present. Your mind eases into the sensory details, the creamy texture, the floral hints of rosewater, the subtle chewiness from orchid root powder, the faintest whisper of mastic resin, and the crunch of pistachios mingling in your thoughts like a lullaby. Each flavor is a note in a calming melody composed by human hands across generations. The deserts that once demanded such ingenuity now seem less harsh, softened by the knowledge that human creativity can turn scarcity into sweetness. Even the simplest pleasures, like a scoop of ice cream on a warm night, carry the weight and wonder of history. You feel the rhythm slow, the pulse of the story fading into a gentle hum, much like the ancient Yakchals keeping their frozen treasures through the night. This hum is a promise that the stories we share and the traditions we hold dear will always find a way to soothe and sustain us. Let your breath lengthen, deep and steady. Picture the soft flicker of lantern light casting dancing shadows as the world slips into a peaceful quietude. The night embraces you with gentle coolness, just like that first scoop of icy delight centuries ago. As you settle deeper into rest, know that these moments of calm, wrapped in history, culture, and simple joys, are yours to return to whenever you need. The story of Persian ice cream is not just a tale of frozen treats, it's a timeless reminder of human warmth and resilience. Now drift slowly, softly into sleep, carried by the cooling breeze of the desert and the sweet echoes of 1,000 years of shared stories. Sweet dreams.